Muhammad, we can start.
Okay, sure. Grateful morning, afternoon, or evening.
Recording in progress.
In the world. I'm Mohammed Al-Mar'i. I'm registered nurse and clinical instructor and administrator in Health Science College. Welcome to the final event of our global webinar series, Higher Education in Focus, Discover, Visualize, and Reimagine. This is a global webinar series that explores the challenges, opportunities, and lessons that educational institutions around the world needs. The series also involves cutting-edge thinking in today's higher education. Learn from higher education expertise, thought leaders, researchers, and innovators, as they share their expertise about these contemporary topics across all disciplines. But before we start our event, let us be aware of our etiquette to make sure that we are all paying attention to the entire event.
Kapasok ko na?
Okay, next. We are about to start our event now, so there are just some technical glitches there. So I just would like to open our event to call in one of the faculty members at St. Paul University, Philippines, to provide us with some words of wisdom related to this event. Let me call in Dr. Brian Echenique.
Thank you, Dr. Benjo. Can I be heard?
Sir. Yes, sir.
Hello?
Yes, we can.
Okay.
Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Thank you. To our resource speaker, Dr. Ryan Baker, Director of Penn's Center for Learning Analytics and Graduate School Professor of Teaching, Learning and Leadership at the University of Pennsylvania, USA. To St. Paul University, Philippines President, Sister Merceditas Ang, SPC. To the organizer and moderator of this global webinar series, Dr. Benjamin Breboneria, Program Director and Coordinator at King Faisal University College of Applied Medical Sciences, Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. To the religious and lay administrators, faculty and students of SPUP, to the teachers and students from Saudi Arabia, India, the Philippines, and other countries. To all other stakeholders of SPUP from different time zones, a pleasant evening, morning, or afternoon. We are now on the final event of this global webinar series on higher education in focus, discover, visualize, and reimagine. An academic venture spearheaded by SPUP in collaboration with its international partners. I am exceptionally elated to be part of this event, knowing that the topic on data mining to be discussed by Dr. Baker shortly has dramatically gained fame and relevance, not only among industry practitioners in IT and business ecosystems, but also among us in the academe. In a knowledge-based economy, data is the new oil of the digital era. As drivers and transformative forces of knowledge-based economies in this global VUCA world, higher education institutions must leverage big data in various forms to produce knowledge, a highly valued commodity in the 21st century. Knowledge mined from big data, when used intelligently and wisely by institutes of higher learning, could inspire policy formulation, inform decision-making, and guide practice towards their sustainable management system and development. Colleges and universities using knowledge generated from data could become more powerful instrumentalities of their states in achieving national and global development goals. Considering the phenomenal, almost magical functionalities of ChatGPT, for instance, not that I advocate the use of this software, I cannot help marveling at the immense possibilities that data mining can afford educators in their crusade of providing holistic, transformative, visionary 21st century education. Because data mining facilitates systematic and insightful data analytics through statistical methods or machine learning algorithms, educators could filter and organize data, drawing from them the most useful information at their disposal. Hence, academics and administrators equipped with the competencies in data mining can identify relevant patterns or trends that would help them address the most urgent questions. Questions such as, how can I improve my students' academic performance and promote their holistic development? How can I make my teaching more effective and more efficient? How can graduates' board exam performance be improved? What can be done to advance employees' professional development and quality of life? How can faculty publication and citation metric be strengthened? What must be done to increase stakeholders' level of satisfaction? What structures or mechanisms can be put in place to bolster accreditation, certification, and ranking performance? How can management systems be made exemplary? Data mining can provide relevant, accurate, feasible answers to these questions, thus fostering a culture of empirical mindset or evidence-based practice. So tonight, I enjoin everyone to pay close attention to the discussion because we all possess the data scientist DNA waiting to be activated or reinforced. I am certain that Dr. Baker would broaden our perspective and deepen our appreciation of data mining as a potent tool for producing and using knowledge. Knowledge, which in many ways is an equally potent game changer in the dynamic sphere of higher education. Let us make the most of this very timely and relevant topic on data mining. Thank you and enjoy the rest of the evening.
Thank you very much, Dr. Echanige, for your words of wisdom. But before we formally start this webinar event, let me first introduce our speaker for tonight and for this afternoon here in Saudi Arabia. Dr. Baker is currently serving as the director of the Penn Center for Learning Analytics at the University of Pennsylvania Graduate School of Education. He is also a professor for teaching, learning, and in the leadership division. He graduated his bachelor's in computer science in Brown University, Master of Science in Carnegie Mellon University, and PhD on the same university. Dr. Baker researches how students use and learn from educational games, intelligent tutors, and other kinds of educational software. Drawing on the fields of learning analytics and learning engineering, he develops methods for mining the data that come out of the interactions between students and the educational software. He then uses this information to improve the understanding of how students respond to educational software and how these responses influences their learning. Prior to joining the Graduate School of Education at TED, Dr. Baker was an associate professor in the Department of Human Development at Teachers College, Columbia University. He has been teaching the Big Data and Education, MOOC, for over a decade with a total enrollment of more than 100,000 students. He has served also as the founding president of the International Educational Data Mining Society, where he currently serves on the board of directors. He has been a co-author of over a dozen of award-winning papers and received the Educational Research Award from the Council of Scientific Society Presidents. The floor is now yours, Dr. Baker.
Hello.
Yes, Doctor.
Hi, good morning. Sorry, I wasn't able to share screen until just now. So technology. Yeah, sorry. There we go. Hi, everybody. Thank you for welcoming me this evening, afternoon, morning, wherever you are. It's great to be here, and I appreciate the invitation. Today, I'm going to talk about the potential of data mining in education. And what I would like to ask is that I will give this talk, and then if there are questions, they can be asked in the chat or however my colleagues prefer. So over the last decades, the explosion in data has transformed field after field, leading to better models and algorithms for a wide range of goals, and leading to large language models like ChatGPT, which my colleague mentioned just a minute ago, that can enhance those models and algorithms further. And big data has made impacts in a lot of areas, including climate science, where it becomes possible to, track where hurricanes might possibly land. Physics, where literally quadrillions of data points become available from large-scale experiments at places like CERN. Biology, where it's become possible to sequence the human genome, at first for just one human, and now increasingly for individual people in order to study their propensity to various cancers and such. And perhaps in what impacts our lives most daily, e-commerce, where a variety of websites, these are the ones that affect life in America most, but it can be different in different countries, where a variety of websites use massive amounts of data on each of us individually for the noble purpose of selling stuff. And the moment's arrived in the last several years where we can obtain and utilize similar amounts of data in education, perhaps not quadrillions of data points, but certainly hundreds of millions. One of the biggest sources of that data is interactive learning environments. And there are a lot of types of interactive learning environments. MOOCs, M-O-O-C, were mentioned a minute ago, and at the bottom center you can see an example of a MOOC from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. These are online environments where students watch videos by professors, famous or not famous, and participate in activities, discussion forums. There's also homework platforms, like on the right, Assessments, which is used worldwide, which helps learners to work through content and gives them instant feedback if they make a mistake, and then provides rich reports for teachers, to simulation environments like Inkit's Top Center, where people are able to do experiments that would be expensive, difficult, or just infeasible in daily life and see the results. To math platforms used in K-12 environments like Alex, to games like Physics Playground at the bottom left, which Physics Playground, people learn concepts in physics by drawing objects that come to life and seeing what happens. environments create extensive amounts of log data from everything the student does, which can be hard to just read by itself, but can be used by algorithms and learning environments. There's also outcome data that's available. Sorry, I think it might be obscuring my screen every time somebody joins the waiting room. I don't know if the organizers can turn that off. But there's also data sets that involve grade and outcome data from a student's start from their educational trajectory in kindergarten all the way to undergraduate to the workforce. This, for example, this graph shows students' trajectories from elementary school to college in one city in Texas. But some of the data sets our group has collected have spanned all the way from schooling all the way to jobs after college. Another big thing is student engagement data, which, so I'm just trying to move this out of the way so it doesn't obscure my screen. Let me try it this way. So, all right, that's a little better. There's another big source of data for education is student engagement data. For example, researchers in several countries, here you see an example, researchers and practitioners in several countries, and here you see an example from Chennai, India, use handheld apps to collect data on whether students are engaged, to get data on which activities are most engaging and which teachers need better support, better professional development. And this produces large-scale data from systems used by hundreds of thousands or even millions of students per year. Platforms like Alex, Cognitive Tutor, Read, edX, and Coursera, and ShooTangX for adult learning. Platforms in the health sciences like Elsevier, SurePath, and EAQ, and whole university system data on course taking and outcomes. And this data has led to the creation of two scientific societies, the International Educational Data Mining Society and the Society for Learning Analytics Research, which have the joint goal of studying data from learning to improve learning and the environments in which it occurs. These two societies have the joint goals of exploring the big data now available on learners and learning for several goals: to promote new scientific discoveries and advance the science of learning, to better assess learners along multiple dimensions, including social, cognitive, emotional, metacognitive, and so on, and also at multiple levels: individual learning, group learning, and institutional level learning. And finally, to create better real-time support for learners, leading to genuinely individualized instruction. Everybody knows that the best instruction is something that's individual to every learner, but that's hard to do. It's hard to, make that scalable. But with data mining and adaptive learning, we can make that possible. There's a lot of types of educational data mining or learning analytics methods. In the reviews I've written with George Siemens and Kalini Asif, we talk about 5 categories: prediction, structure discovery, relationship mining, visualization, and discovery with models. In prediction, we develop a model which can infer a single aspect of the data, the quote-unquote predicted variable, from some combination of other aspects of the data, which we call the predictor variables. And examples of this might be which students are bored, or which students will fail this class, or which students are on track to fail the nursing licensure exam. And the goal here is to infer something that matters so we can do something about it. The second big category, structure discovery, is where we find structure and patterns in the data which emerge quote unquote naturally. There's no specific thing we're looking for. We're just looking to see what comes out of the data if we format it a certain way. So this might include, let's say that we have, say in the assessments platform, several tens of thousands of mathematics problems written by different teachers across an entire country. We might say, which of these math problems map to the same cognitive skills? Or let's say that we have a large population of students all going through the same curriculum. And we can ask, are there groups of students who approach the curriculum differently, who have just fundamentally different strategies for it? Or let's say that we have a large-scale online course with thousands of learners, and we could say, which students develop more social relationships in the discussion forum, and what are they talking about? Relationship mining. In relationship mining, we're trying to discover relationships between variables in a data set with many variables. So let's say that we have a set of courses and students have choices about which order they do the courses in. We can look to say, are there some trajectories through those courses that are more effective than others? And which aspects of the design of learning systems have implications for student engagement? And in Discovery with Models, finally, we develop a model through one type of data mining, machine learning. Maybe it's prediction models, maybe it's clustering, which is a type of structure discovery. Maybe it's knowledge engineering, where we go through an intensive process of trying to understand how human experts reason. And then we apply that model to data and use it as a component in another analysis. An example of that would be taking a model of student learning in an online learning platform and seeing whether it predicts long-term outcomes. There's a lot of applications of these kind of tools. Among them include, perhaps most widely used, prediction of what learner is going to drop out or what learner is going to succeed. That's used in a lot of applications, and including, for example, in nursing in the United States. Automated detection of learning, engagement, emotion, or strategy for better individualization. Better reporting for instructors and other stakeholders about their students, what they're struggling with how disengaged they are. And again, as mentioned earlier, basic scientific discovery in education, which can help to improve education in the long term. Adaptive learning, that one of those applications, adapting to what a student needs and trying to create learning that's best for them, requires three things. First, developing something about the student. Second, knowing what matters. And third, doing the right thing about it. Now, some people think lately that large language models like GPT can be a shortcut to adaptive learning. And they can be. There's a lot of things that they're very useful for. But the large language model still needs information on the learner somehow. So even though some of these new technological advancements make it a little easier to develop new educational tools, that doesn't mean that they solve all the problems. I'll talk first about determining something about the student. So it turns out that these days in 2023, there's a lot of things that it's been shown that we can infer. For example, if a student is working on a specific skill, have they learned it? That's key to being able to decide if they're ready to move on. Or if we have a lot of content, we have to figure out where in the learning sequence a student is so we can give them the right content. We can figure out from a relatively small amount of data where in the learning sequence the student is. Or for example, we can infer whether the student's wheel spinning, quote unquote, American idiom, but it's what the field uses, trying really hard but making no progress or very minimal progress. And it actually turns out from some work from my group that we can actually differentiate two students who are working very hard and don't seem to be making progress, but one of them is eventually going to get it and the other one isn't. We can infer complex learning. For example, Sale Pedro and colleagues have developed a learning system, INKITS, that can detect whether a student has developed inquiry skills that actually transfer between different domains. So what Sale Pedro and his colleagues measure in physics also turns out to predict inquiry skill in biology. Other folks have worked on developing models that can detect if a student's develop rich conceptual understanding, not just the ability to repeat a fact or to compute a mathematical calculation, but whether they have deep understanding of physics or computational thinking. Also, robust learning. Not just does the student know it now, but will they remember what they learned, which is particularly key, for example, for foreign language learning. And is the student prepared for new learning opportunities? Are they prepared for the future learning? Ultimately, in today's world, it's not just a matter of we teach somebody something and they use it. It's a matter of we teach somebody something and they need it for the rest of their careers to build on their knowledge and learn new things. Metacognition. We can detect metacognition. That's students thinking about their own thinking. So, for example, how confident is the student? Is the student asking for help when they need it? Very important skill to know when you need help. And is the student persisting positively in the face of challenge? On the flip side of that, we can also detect disengaged behaviors. For example, in a lot of learning platforms, it's been documented that some students game the system, trying to get through the learning material without learning it by tricking the system into letting them move on. Also, it's been demonstrated that it's possible to detect if a student is careless, not putting in the proper effort to do the work. There's a lot of stuff you can see that people can detect. And yet one more is emotion and context, affect. Increasingly, it's possible to detect in learning systems whether a student is bored or frustrated or confused or in a deep state of engaged concentration where they're just kind of hanging on every word that the teacher says. And it's possible to detect these things solely from students' interaction with the learning system online. No physical sensors needed, no galvanic skin response bracelets, no EEG headbands, not even cameras. Using sensors where feasible can increase model quality, but in a lot of situations, it's not feasible. Students are working at home without a webcam. Kids don't feel comfortable wearing a galvanic skin response bracelet. Oftentimes, sensors just aren't feasible. They're expensive. They're breakable. Let me give one quick example. Automated detectors of student engagement and affect, emotion, and context in the assessments platform, detecting whether students bored, frustrated, confused, in a state of engaged concentration, whether they're gaming the system to get through that learning, if they're off task talking to another kid, and if they're careless. Assessments is a web-based math tutor primarily used for middle school mathematics in the United States, although it's used in all kinds of other areas. For example, I use it in my own graduate level courses. It gives students a question. It offers multi-step hints to a struggling student. And if a student makes an error, the system breaks down the problem into sub-steps that help the student work their way to an answer. This slide is actually out of date. I'm surprised I have this erroneous slide. I built the slide deck just 3 days ago, but somehow I copied the slide over wrong. Assessments is now used by over 600,000 children a year. And that went from 50,000 to 600,000 during the pandemic. Assessments leads to better learning than traditional homework. It's a good system. It leads to better learning than traditional homework. It leads to better learning than traditional classroom practice. And there's multiple large-scale randomized studies showing a substantial effect, including studies that involved every single middle school in the US states of Maine and North Carolina. The process for how we develop automated detectors of student engagement and affect in the system is as follows. First, we went out to classrooms, and this is me in a classroom, although it's not these same students. We have a handheld app called Heart, which supports us in conducting systematic observations where we watch students and we see what their emotion and their engagement is. And over 150 people have been certified for the BROMP protocol in 7 countries. If you're interested in BROMP certification yourself, please get in touch. BROMP certification is currently available, among other places, in the United Arab Emirates, in the Philippines, in China, in India, also in several other countries. And then once we've collected this data, and it can be used either to build these kind of detectors or just on its own. So in India, the corporation of Chennai actually used BROMP at scale in their classrooms to study student emotion engagement in different curricula. And they were able to determine, for example, that students in reform curricula were more engaged than students in traditional curricula. But once we've collected these, in this case, we synchronized the Android observations to the students' interactions with the learning software. We then used data mining to find behaviors that co-occurred with the human observations, distilling features of the interaction that we thought might correlate to what we were trying to detect. We then input this into standard data mining machine learning algorithms, including, in the last few years, deep learning algorithms. Now, for those of you who haven't heard of deep learning, today, large language models like ChatGPT are the revolution in artificial intelligence. But 5 years ago, deep learning algorithms were the revolution in artificial intelligence. And large language models are actually built on top of deep learning. You can't use large language models in all cases. You can't use it on interaction data. So in that case, the field is still using deep learning. After building these models, we then tested whether they generalized to new students and new populations. In this case, we tested whether it generalized across students in rural, urban, and suburban schools in the northeastern United States. So children in the countryside, children in the city, children in wealthy neighborhoods. And these students were diverse across samples in terms of their personal family wealth, their race, and their ethnicity. We then tested whether the model was able to tell whether behavior was present from when a behavior is absent. And if we compare to first-line medical diagnostics, AUC-ROC is a metric often used to evaluate medical diagnostics, and our behavior detectors were at the same level as first-line medical diagnostics. Our affect detectors, our detectors of emotion, were somewhat worse. However, when we did the upgrades with deep learning, we were able to get it basically to just about the same level as first-line medical diagnostics. The result was models that could infer a student's disengagement and their emotion in real time with only a 20-second delay, and models that could also be applied at scale through retrospective log files, which is to say that we could take data from the past, apply these models for analysis. And this leads us to the second part of developing adaptive learning, knowing what matters. So, okay, we can determine a lot of things about the student, but which ones should we determine? So take those automated detectors of engagement and affect, and also detectors of learning we developed in that assessments platform. It's kind of cool to be able to say, hey, this student is trying to get through that learning, or this student is bored, but does it matter? To answer that question, we applied the detectors to several years of entire year student data, thousands of students, millions of actions within the learning software. In our first work on this, Pardis et al. 2013, and you're probably saying, why am I talking about 10-year-old work? The answer is because it's a trajectory of work that's going to come much later. So in our first work, we applied the detectors to a whole year of data from over 1,000 students who use the software, and we used it to predict their national exams, actually their state exams at the end of the year. We found that gaming the system was negatively correlated to standardized exams, negative 0.36. Engaged concentration was positively correlated at 0.36. Boredom was negatively correlated at 0.2. Now, negative 0.36 is very close to the magnitude and correlation between cigarette smoking and lifespan. So we all know that cigarettes are bad for you, but the actual effect on your lifespan from smoking is about the same as the effect on your learning outcomes from gaming system to get through without learning. We then took those detectors and applied them and we linked them up to data on whether the student will go to college or not 6 years later. In the United States, we have a database of which students go to college and where, and so we were able to predict from when a kid was 13 years old whether they would go to college. 12, 13 years old, will they go to college? 69% of the time for new students. And more importantly, the model can indicate what aspects of a student's behavior are predictive of college attendance. For example, perhaps Alex is less likely to go to college because he's getting confused and then gaming the system to get through without having to struggle through the material, whereas Maria is less likely to go to college perhaps because she's getting bored and careless. And going forward, these same constructs can also predict what a student will major in when they get to college. So students who game the system or get careless are less in math class, are less likely to enroll in majors that involve math or science. And going even further, this is why this is a many-year trajectory of research. Mia Almeida and I demonstrated in 2020 that these same constructs can predict what area a student will take a job in after college. So whether you game the system or not, to try to get through the learning material when you're 12 predicts what job you have after your studies. And I see there's a question in the chat. Please post it and I'll answer questions at the end. Thank you. Another example of using these detectors and seeing which detectors matter is that student interaction within a massive online open course on data science can predict whether the student will eventually submit a scientific paper in the field. So in particular, students who post a lot in the class are likely to submit a scientific paper, but also students who just read a lot of the posts. They don't post themselves, they just read everything, are just as likely to submit a scientific paper. Now, it turns out that people who post a lot are more likely to complete the course, but people who read a lot are just as likely to go on. And that's important because ultimately we don't really care if anyone completes this course. We care if people are actually going to participate in the field. So, okay, we can detect the student's gaming system. We can detect that a student is posting to the discussion forum. What do we do? That comes down to doing the right thing. There's a huge space of things we can do in response to student disengagement or poor learning. One is what are sometimes called stealth interventions that change the learner's experience in subtle ways. Sneaky interventions, I guess. For example, mastery learning. Most of the online learning platforms that call themselves adaptive learning use what's called mastery learning as their only form of adaptation. Mastery learning just says, if a student's getting wrong answers, you keep giving them the same question until not the same question, you keep giving them the same content until they get the right answers regularly. So you keep a student practicing a skill until they've mastered it. That's in a very clear sense a stealth intervention, because it's not like it's making an obvious change, it just changes the activity when you've mastered it. Another one is adjusting difficulty or adding scaffolding. So if a student is struggling, we make things easier. If a student's doing well, we make things harder. We might not even tell the student we're doing it. Or if a student gets things wrong a few times, we might add a support. Another big area of intervention is reports to instructors, course designers, or even the learners themselves. So if we have these models, we can tell people about it. For example, here's the skillometer from Cognitive Tutor Mathia. The skillometer simply shows students on their screen which skills they've mastered, the gold bars, and which skills they haven't mastered, the green bars. Over here on the right, you see a report from Civitas, a platform used by universities in several countries to predict which students are at risk. And this is a report showing what factors are the biggest factors putting students at risk at that university. At the bottom is a report from Transfer VR, which shows instructors which content students are struggling with more than others so they can fix it. In general, that task of analyzing what content is working well or poorly is a particularly powerful thing for adaptive learning. For example, my colleagues Sujit Gowda, Iyad Solomon, and I, in a study conducted in the UAE, were able to take a large platform with a lot of instructional videos and determine which instructional videos led to better student performance. We then passed this information on to the content team so that they could fix that content. So that they could identify what worked in the good content and deploy that to the other content. Here's another example. Here's an example of immediate reports for instructors from Mingyu Feng's work. And this is from the assistance platform I mentioned earlier. The assistance platform provides reports in real time, like up to the moment, on what content students are struggling with, what mistakes they're making, and for given students, what those students are struggling with. This is used in several ways. For example, aside from just talking to students in real time, it can be used to review homework and discuss common areas at the beginning of each class. So this leads to kind of a flipped model where the students practice in the homework. The teacher sees what they're struggling with. The next day at the beginning of class, the teacher says, all right, 40% of you got this question wrong, and you almost all made the same wrong answer. Let's talk about it. And what you can do is identify a student who got a wrong answer, ask them to explain what they were thinking, identify a student who got a right answer, ask them to explain why their answer is the right one. You can also use this to see which students are disengaged and communicate with them. For example, I've used this system in my own graduate level classes, and it led to the best teaching evals that my course had in years. I was able to say to students, hey, I noticed you're late on this homework. Is everything okay? And I was able to say at the beginning of class, 40% of you made this stat error. Let's talk about it. Another practice, which Neil Miller and his colleagues talk about, so do Janet Schofield, other folks, is corrective remediation, which is the teaching practice of using data to identify what students are struggling with. In particular, in this case, we determine which students are struggling right now, this very moment, what they're struggling with, and then go over and talk to them in real time. And corrective remediation can involve working with students individually or in small groups. Yet another category, and again, there's a lot of things we can do, is automated interventions, which can be delivered by something like ChatGPT, by animated agents. On the left, you see Steve, which is an agent who teaches people to operate complex machinery by pointing at things. In the middle, you see the agents from MathStream who communicate with students through emotion and try to scaffold them emotionally. On the right, you see Scooter the tutor, a puppy who interacts with students when they're gaming the system and tries to help them learn to use the software more effectively and appropriately. Here's a picture of one such agent, Rex. Rex is in the Inkit system. In the Inkit system, as I mentioned a while ago, students conduct experiments, and the system can help them see whether they're conducting an appropriate set of experiments. In this case, Rex says, I think the data you're collecting won't help you test your hypothesis because you aren't designing a controlled experiment. Excuse me. The student can then say, excuse me. Student can then say, okay, and try to go out and fix it, or they can ask Rex for help on how to do that. Alternatively, if the student is just mashing the buttons and playing with it and not taking the system seriously, Rex can say things like, hey, are you just playing with the buttons? Take your learning seriously or I'll eat you. Fortunately, Rex has never eaten anybody, so students do learn. Chatbots, that's another big category. Chatbots historically had very canned responses that felt very artificial to people, but new large language modeling technology makes much more flexible and tailored dialogues possible. The real challenge is getting those systems to do exactly what you want, but they can be incredibly flexible. So I hope this is clarified, this demonstrates that there's a huge space of potential things you can do when a student is struggling, disengaged, having negative emotion. It's still an open area for the field, and it's an area of considerable ongoing research for my lab, what we do when we learn something. So again, we get that structure of determine something about the student, determine something that matters, and do the right thing. The big idea overall is that thanks to the big data now becoming available on student learning and modern data mining methods, we can make inferences about students in real time that are predictive of long-term outcomes so that we can track a student's engagement or knowledge or whatever now, predict the longer-term impact of what's going on now, intervene to help re-engage students and support their learning, helping to create learning that's more adaptive to individual learners' needs. Effectively, if we can see where our student is, predict their future, we can change their future. There's lots of challenges, but lots of opportunities as well. So I'll open the floor to questions and discussion in a minute. I want to conclude with some resources. So first of all, we have a massive online open course, Big Data and Education, which is running on edX right now. We've just updated the videos for our 10th anniversary edition, and we'll be updating the assignments later this summer. You can also find all those videos on our massive online open textbook with the same name. Just search for it. Also, the University of Pennsylvania now offers an online master's degree in learning analytics, which is currently admitting. If you're interested, please feel free to reach out. We also have a journal, scientific journal, Computer-Based Learning in Context. Thank you, Benjo. We also have an online journal, Computer-Based Learning in Context, which is devoted to studying online learning in different countries and how students' experience and needs is different in different places. We welcome scientific publications from around the world, and we have an emerging scholars track. So if you've never published scientifically before, feel free to reach out to us. All of my publications are available online. Google Ryan Baker. There's a few Ryan Bakers out there, but you should be able to figure out which one I am. And finally, we have feeds on LinkedIn, Twitter, and Facebook, where we publish all of our latest scientific findings. They're low traffic. I don't spam your feed, but you can follow what we're doing. So thank you all for your time and attention. I'm happy to answer questions. I see there was one in the forum. It was for the patterns of data to be produced or generated from the software. If you can repost your question, because I don't actually understand what the question is. Thank you very much. And I'm happy to open the floor to questions in general. Thank you.
The question, Dr. Her, is for the patterns of data. Maybe, Doctor, her question is you do data mining from a software, probably. And this software generates patterns of data to assist you and look at the variances in terms of these data. I think because
Yes.
Probably
So online learning platforms generate a lot of data, but that data is in a form that's not immediately. That data is in a form that is not immediately usable. So we have to process it through various software packages, which if you don't have programming experience, the best package is probably RapidMiner. But these days, actually, the very best way to do data mining is simply to use Python and to ask ChatGPT to write a Python program to do what you want. If you know what you want, ChatGPT can write the code and then you can run it in what's called a Jupyter notebook or a Colab. And ChatGPT can tell you what to put into Jupyter Notebook, or Bard, Google Bard, can just put it straight into Colab for you. So that's actually the easiest way to do data mining today.
Honestly, doctor, like for example, here in my university, we never, like in my case, I really never probably heard of the concept itself. So I got curious about it. So that's why I am thinking, even if related to the question that one of the participants raised. So is this like similar to artificial intelligence kind of technologies? Because it seems,
Sorry,
yeah. I mean,
I
doctor,
couldn't hear.
yes, doctor here in Saudi Arabia, really, for me, honestly, in terms of this concept, I just heard it just recently. Is it like similar to artificial intelligence kind of platforms, but will assist you on how multiples of data can be can determine patterns and will provide you, like historical trends and in terms of this data. So it's just on my mind.
So I didn't quite hear every word. There was a little bit of connection issue, but I think what you were asking was tools that analyze data, provide trends and such. How are they similar and different from artificial intelligence?
Yes.
Okay. So it's worth pointing out that the words artificial intelligence have a lot of meanings, and they're used in a lot of ways. Some people use artificial intelligence to refer to tools like ChatGPT because they behave in seemingly very intelligent ways. But that's just one flavor of the vast variety of types of artificial intelligence. The term artificial intelligence could be used to refer to machine learning models of a lot of sorts. Ultimately, tools like large language models still lack the agency of what people sometimes refer to as artificial general intelligence or agentic artificial intelligence. Ultimately, artificial intelligence is a model that can do something that is smart. It's a model or an algorithm that can behave in a way that replicates human abilities or even creates abilities humans don't have. It's the ability to do things. And so everything I've talked about today arguably is artificial intelligence. It's less sophisticated artificial intelligence in some ways than the large language models that have become popular, but those only can do certain things. They do those certain things extremely well. And that said, large language models are more general than a lot of other tools. But ultimately, the question with any artificial intelligence is, how intelligent is it actually? What is it making its decisions based on? What is it making its behaviors, and how complex and sophisticated is its behaviors? And that just, there's a whole spectrum within which large language models like ChatGPT are one thing. I see we also have a question in the forum. Okay,
We have
go
a
ahead.
question, yes. Doctor, we have a question from Hussein. How
Yep.
about age groups? Which method would suit adult workers rather than younger students?
So Hussein, are you asking about which adaptive learning methods or which data mining methods?
Yes, Mr. Hussein? Or data mining methods to use, probably.
So if it's data mining, it's all the exact same methods. There's no difference in methods for data mining. Yeah, so there's no difference in the data mining methods used for adult workers versus younger students. The data you have available often varies for older learners. Learning platforms used for corporate training or for adult learning often log less data than platforms for younger learners, but that's largely just a historical thing. Ultimately, if you have data on what a learner did, if you have data on their outcomes, then you can do data mining. The finer grained the data is on what the learner did, the better. So if you just have data from grades and courses, you're going to be much worse off than if you have data from grades on assignments. If you have data from grades on assignments, you're not going to have nearly as much as if you have every single thing the student did in an online platform. Similarly, the outcomes, the more important the outcomes are, the better you're going to do. So if you capture data on students' grades on assignment, that's not nearly as valuable as their grades in a class, which is not as valuable in the long term as grades on whether they, succeeded in the program, passed the licensure exam, or best of all, can succeed in the task on the job. So, but ultimately the methods you can use for adult learners are just the same as for kids. And in my center, we've done work on everything from 4-year-olds to adults learning medicine, adults learning nursing, adults learning data science. I see we have another question. Well, data mining is a very rich source of data. How do we go about it without violating data privacy? Schools have vast data, but responsibility regarding keeping that information private. That's absolutely right. Privacy is incredibly important. And I've written extensively on the trade-off between privacy and utility. Ultimately, the question is, what value can we provide for people? And what privacy do we need to maintain? And there's definite value on both sides, right? We want to be beneficent. We want to benefit our learners. Ultimately, the question is, what are we using the data for? For example, using the data to sell somebody something is a violation of their privacy, much more than using it to benefit them, to support their learning. Sharing data with the whole world, putting it on the web, is a much bigger issue in terms of privacy than having it within the university. So for example, in most places, instructors have a right to data on their students' learning. That's not usually considered controversial. In most places, university administrators have rights to students' data, and that's not considered controversial. Again, it depends on what data. In a lot of places, sharing that same data to a vendor under very strict privacy and security rules is also considered acceptable. So for example, if I am the developer of a platform that's going to predict which students are likely to fail out, and I only use that data to predict if students are going to fail out, that's typically considered acceptable. It varies on local laws vary, contracts vary. Also, that data often is shared without student names. Now, sometimes a student can still be re-identified. For example, let's say that we have data from a discussion forum, and even though we take my name out, I post on the discussion forum, "Hi, my name is Ryan. I'm a professor. I live in Haverford, Pennsylvania. I love to play bowling." Eventually it becomes re-identifying. So there's definitely issues around safeguards, but the key is to find ways to maintain security and privacy as much as we can while also benefiting students. And that's a real trade-off, and different cultures and nations have different trade-offs for that. For example, the United States is much looser about privacy than Europe, the European Union, but much stricter about privacy than China.
So far, out of curiosity, because I was just having a conversation with someone a few days ago, and she directly collects the data from the participants, such as mothers, from mothers, and the data were, like, for example, released in a global platform, and there were some misunderstandings probably, or ethical challenges. Basically, the owner of that data is the one who's collecting it, right?
That actually varies by country. In some countries, the owner of the data is the person who collects it. They still have to, and in some countries where that's true, they still have to have consent. And in some countries, they don't have to have consent. And that also varies. Sometimes opt-out is a requirement. Sometimes opt-in is a requirement. Sometimes you don't have to get consent for certain uses, but you do for others. Sometimes people are considered to have consented to data use by simply enrolling in an educational program. Now, in other places, the ultimate owner of the data is the person whose data it is. That's, I think, the stance in the European Union, where there's actually the right to be forgotten enshrined in law. And the right to be forgotten is a noble thing. It's also something that the way the EU implemented it can cause a lot of headaches and a lot of unnecessary costs. For example, at the University of Pennsylvania, I'm our data steward for our higher ed online open course data, our MOOC data. And we have had 16, I believe, at my last recounting, we've had 16 requests to be forgotten by people. And those 16 requests have cost us tens of thousands of dollars to accommodate and to support systems for. And literally all we're forgetting in this case is just basically deleting people's data. Like, so it just, in other words, there's a lot of variance in what the rules are, and complying with those rules can have different consequences in different places.
Thank you so much, Doctor. For our dear colleagues, my dear colleagues, do you have questions? Dr. Alan, Dr. Brian, and Dr. Jeremy, before we close our event for this afternoon? Dr. Jeremy first, please.
Good evening. So far, I have no question, but I have some insights on the importance of doing data mining in education, because this goes hand in hand with research, and that is something that we really have to have it embedded in our systems who are in the educational system, like professors, instructors, lecturers, and even students. Because as young as we are, for the students as young as you are, it's very important that you already embed in your systems the essence of research, so that every day of your lives you will be able to come up with technical, scientific, and systematic decisions in all that you do. Thank you very much for the sharing, Dr. Ryan.
And thank you for your observations.
Yes. Also, Dr. Alan, please. Dr. Alan, yes.
Hi, good evening. And thank you very much, Dr. Baker, for the sharing. It is indeed empowering and at the same time enlightening. I would like to focus also my reflection on the importance of data mining in education as a means for us to improve learning outcomes. So I think that's one of the things that we need data mining in education for. And with that, I thank you for this opportunity and thank you for all your sharing. Thank you, Dr. Baker. Sir Renjo, thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we're about to close our event. I think we don't have any questions from the rest of the participants that we have. So, of course, we would like to first say thank you to St. Paul University Philippines, particularly to Sister Mercedes Ang, because this project went through different challenges as well along its journey. And for St. Paul University being one of those universities to trust, particularly in the Philippines, we are really grateful to you, Sister. And of course, to our speaker, Dr. Ryan Baker, I appreciate your patience behind the scenes. Thank you also for your support and for your grateful accommodation to this regarding this request. And of course, also to our participants, we have been consistently being attended by diverse participants through all the projects that we have done, and that is really very enlightening. We have learned a lot from the 10 series that we had. What about you, Dr. Jeremy? Would you like to say something?
Thank you very much, Dr. Barbonera, for spearheading this global webinar for higher education in focus, this global webinar for and on behalf and with St. Paul University Philippines. Thank you very much for pulling in all the speakers. They have all been very good speakers and we have learned a lot from them. Thank you very much to all the participants from the first session up to this session. We also would like to thank all the facilitators from session 1 to tonight's session, today's session. Thank you very much, Dr. Barbonera. You have done a very good job, a very big one, and we will look forward to more in the future. Thank you.
But of course, I mean, expression of gratitude, of course, to Sister Merceditas Ang, and I'm sure that the rest of the faculty members from Singapore University here, also from Dr. Ann Tanosi, Dr. Bawa, and the rest of the College of School of Health Sciences, including nursing, and all the colleges also that participated to this webinar platform. What about Sir Alan, before we close in case that you would like to say something to close this event, please, since our Sister Merceditas is here.
Yes, thank you very much for all the opportunities, Dr. Benjo. And I would like to personally extend the invitation to you. Please come home to SPUP. We will see each other here.
See you soon.
Okay? And
Yeah.
thank you very much for all the opportunities. And of course, we would like also to commit that if again you would be organizing the same endeavor, we will be supporting. Thank you very much. This is what we are in the academy. We support each other. Thank you very much and see you soon.
Thank you so much.
Dr. Bench,
Yes.
Dr. Bench, may we take this opportunity to invite our participants from different countries, also our speakers, that St. Paul University Philippines is holding the 6th International Interdisciplinary Research Conference to be held on August 10 to 12 at St. Paul University Philippines. This is going to be conducted on site already. So for everyone who would like to join us in this endeavor, you may get the information from spupiirc6.ph, and so that we would be able to accept your papers and your registrations, and we would be able to provide letters of invitation for those who need visa coming to the Philippines. Thank you very much for allowing me to plug this in, Dr.
I think really to close this.
Doc Benjo,
Yes. Yes.
Doc Benjo, just addendum to the information or invitation of Dr. Morales, I would like also to tell the world that SPUP has been ranked 81 among the top 100 global innovative universities. So, and at the same time, we just received the news that SPUP has been ranked in the Times Higher Education World University Ranking or Impact Rank. Thank you very much. This is our university.
Thank you. To close in our events, I would like to just mention what I am always saying, I mean, particularly from the start of the event and up to the last event. This will not be possible without the kindness and without the gratitude of all the people who would like to extend their knowledge and expertise and wisdom to the participants who are attending all the series that we have been doing for the last 2 or 3 months. We have reached for up to a number of 500, around less than 500 participants in 2 or 3 of our events, and it varies from in terms of number, and coming from more than 12 to 15 to a maximum of 22 participants from, in different countries from the previous events as well. So I would like to extend again to close this event to Dr. Ryan Baker. Thank you so much. And I really appreciate your kindness, even what's happening in at the back of this project. I really appreciate that. So it keeps us more grounded and grateful when the people around us are supporting us and also trying to do something that will benefit also people from different places. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Baker, and thank you, Dr. Benjo. Hope we will meet in future webinars.
Bye.